Very well. So a lot of the emphasis, as I showed before, is placed on the guarantee of identity. To us, it is essential that whenever a product reaches a winery, the people at the winery know and have the certainty that what they're using is what they wanted. So that is a key parameter for us. That's where we decide whether to accept or reject a batch of product. That's the first bar that we have to fix and to live by. Then, while respecting the parameters and specs of the product, the organization of Italiana Biotecnologie will constantly monitor a set of parameters that involve several parameters at the same time in terms of sensory, inherent, functional, chemical properties. From a sensory perspective, we assess aspects such as odor, color, and appearance, which may look trivial, but they tell us a lot as to the production process. Take color. During fermentation, and I'm talking about yeast production, based on the pH profile for propagation, can change its final color at very low pH levels during propagation. Many compounds that impart color in the propagation medium will adhere to the yeast and therefore change its color. So a darker yeast is an indication to us of a low pH level during fermentation, and also the color may depend on the cleaning of the yeast cream during production. So darker products are products that we can legitimately believe are burdened with some residues from the production process, and also the odor can be impacted by the fats contained in the yeast, and then the appearance, the grain size, the particle size tells us a lot as to the extrusion, drying, and sieving of the product. That tells us a lot about the production process. Now, in the number of the inherent qualitative parameters of the product, we have the amount of dry matter, specific volume, suspension properties, proteins, phosphate, trehalose, glycogen, and the amount of E491, which is the emulsified part of the product. These are all parameters that we've decided to regulate and create specs for, in view of the product that we need. Also, the fermentation power is checked in terms of functional qualities and properties. We have a standard medium to assess the fermentation power. And we also measure the live cells or viable cells and the keeping quality, which simulates stressful conditions to assess the stability of the product itself, and therefore to anticipate the quality in terms of fermentation power and live cell content at the end of the product's life. Because if you know that, you'll also know which yeasts can be readily used, the ones that will last for longer in storage, and therefore the marketing window. Some parameters have already been regulated. For instance, the pathogens. We measure coliforms, E. coli, and staphylococci, salmonella. We've also added the listeria, which is not indicated by the OIV as a control element, but the COFAREC, which in Europe is the association that keeps together, that associates all the yeast producers in Europe, has stated that that's a desirable parameter to measure. We also measure saprophytes, lactic acid bacteria, total mesophilic bacteria counts, and acetic bacteria, and so forth. So while doing all of this, it is not enough to keep the numbers and data in mind. So we think it's instead necessary, on top of measuring, to place the information in a system that will make it possible for us to source and retrieve the data in real time, tracing back the supply chain in our yeast data monitoring, which contains all the data pertaining to individual strains. We have strain sheets for our virtual strain library. We have all the research and development data to produce our production recipes, the types of mediums for production, all quality data. We have all the tests for individual batches with all the specs. And then we have case studies that come from direct experience in the wineries. Whenever we have problems that we need to solve, whenever solved, we'll turn it into a case study, and all the information will converge into this tool, which can be used by all the people at Ever. We have all the history of individual batches, strains, and productions on the same platform. So essentially, what I'm saying, and many other people also say, is that the most imperfect form of knowledge is that based on assumptions. So we said enough with the assumptions. We want to measure, we want to define specific performance indicators, we want goals that are numerical goals. We need performance numbers to adhere to. It's only in that way that we can perform better and better and become more and more competitive all along the supply chain. Now, this obviously translates in doing things well and doing them right the first time and every time we do them. We do things to get to a product performance level which equals the expectations of the prospective users. That means excellence from a quality as well as operational point of view. We too adhere to the principle of excellence as InfoWine stated they do. Thank you very much for listening.